Welcome back to another episode of Her Story Untold Studios, where we explore the powerful stories of women who have risen above life challenges with strength and grace. I am your host, Tanirpw, and each week we are bringing you conversations that highlight the resilience, wisdom, and courage it takes to turn pain into purpose. Today's guest has an inspiring journey, and I'm going to let her introduce herself before we dive into that.
My name is Robin St. James, and Tanir, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I love what you're doing here, and I think these stories are important, and I'm honored that you wanted to hear mine. I'm so happy to be here. You're going to have to start because I don't know what part of my life you want to kick in on.
Can you share a little bit more about the early physical abuse you experienced, Robin, and how it shaped your outlook on life?
Well, my father was raised by an alcoholic. And obviously, during the days of, you beat your children, that sort of thing. And so, where he went with that was he never used alcohol, but he had a rage burning in him. And back in the day, nobody went to therapy. There weren't there to gain access to heal. And there was such stigma attached to it. So my dad, the way he vented his rage was through control, and he never actually would tell you what the rules were until you broke them. And then when you broke them, I got beaten. And you can see I'm kind of small. I've always been, small bone, that kind of thing. And so I got beaten with a belt. And I have a degree in psychology, and I know now that when you hit a child, when you strike a child, all that will happen is it will change the child's behavior in that minute, but it won't have any lasting positive change. And so when what that taught me was to be afraid of men, number one. And it also taught me that love looks like being hit. Love looks like never telling you what the rules are until you've broken them. And that's what I set out into the world with. And where that landed me was with an abusive boyfriend. And that ended, and there was a succession because I had like two, but the third one was the one where it ended with me actually stabbing him. And I did not kill him, but that was my wake up call that I'm seriously broken and I've got to fix myself. And that was in my 20s. And
Right.
I had also developed, a raging cocaine habit and, drinking a lot. But I was hugely successful on the outside. So I was functioning. And so I didn't think I had a problem.
Right.
And nobody ever suggested that I might have a problem. But when I stabbed that man, that was my wake up call.
So
Yeah.
would you say the cocaine was part of your coping mechanism from the pain and abuse?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would have, if my body would have held out, I would have rode that train all the way to the grave. Because the thing about cocaine and the way it reacts with your serotonin and your dopamine levels, it warps them, first of all. But when you get that first hit, when you get that, everything's fine in the world. I'm fine, you're fine, everything's fine. Nothing has changed except you've added a chemical. And so I weighed about 80 pounds at that point in time. And that's when I went into the program. That's when I started doing therapy. That's when I went on the offensive to heal myself because I knew that there were all kinds of things that I needed to address.
Right.
Yeah.
So when did you feel like, okay, this is it? I need to change. This is turning into a snowball effect and it's becoming worse. Was it after you stabbed your last boyfriend that you felt like this is a wake up call?
Yeah. It was actually when I walked out of jail because they arrested me, for assault with a deadly weapon other than a firearm. And anytime I tell that story, anybody who knows about those laws, they'll go, "Oh, that was in California, wasn't it?" It's like, yeah, And so evidently that's a thing. But when I walked out of the jail and I had to face my friend who was there to pick me up, and the disappointment on his face, and I couldn't go one more step in that direction. I just knew it. It's that truth that all of a sudden overwhelms you. That's the best way I can articulate it. There was nothing in my body, in my brain, that would allow me to deny what a mess I was at that point in time. Nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've spoken about stabbing your third boyfriend and how you had a wake up call and that started to change your life. At that very moment you wanted to change your life. Now, is that how you ended up in the entertainment industry?
Oh my gosh. Now that's a whole story there. Because, well, I'll kind of give you a real high arc of this. Because I was, at that point in time, I was in technology. And when, after that happened, obviously my the company I worked for was like, you have to go, because I had a high profile job, and they lost all trust. And so I ended up moving to LA. And in LA, when I first, I left home at 17. And so my first real job was in a hotel in the French Quarter in New Orleans. And I succeeded at that. And that's how I got involved in the technology industry. And so I had to get a job, and I couldn't, my reputation was shot in tech. So I had to get a job, and I got a job at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. And I was a front desk. Well, I wasn't a front desk clerk. I was a cashier, a front desk cashier. And so then that moved me into for the Beverly Wilshire. And we had this big project. That's a whole thing too. And once we finished this big project, it was a huge renovation project and new technology where we're creating hardware. It was really a lot of fun, but I was done with that. I wanted my next challenge, and it was okay. Oh, I'm in LA, the entertainment industry, and I had acted before, so I thought, okay, cool, I'll go to acting school. So I went to acting school for a couple of years, and I went out on a couple of auditions, and I went, "Oh, I don't like this. I do not like this." And so I decided what I would do is I'd become a producer. So I took a skill set I already had, which is finance. I understand accounting, I understand all of that. And I have always known that if you understand how the money works for a business, you can understand any business. And so that's how I started in the entertainment industry and moved up to where a writer producer. So that's how I made that pivot. And during that time, I didn't have my focus was on my work and healing. And I was doing all kinds of things in those two regards. But no drugs, no alcohol, I became a vegetarian. I mean, I just really cleaned my act up. Started treating my body holistically, naturopathically, all of that. And I really, that's my big turning point. But the Beverly Wilshire, that job, which was a job I had done like 10 years previously, was the job that saved me. And thankfully, my ego didn't get out there and go, well, you should be, or whatever.
Right.
I was humble enough to accept the help I needed. Yeah.
Awesome. So can you talk a little bit about the relationship you had with the man who was a sociopath?
Well, that that relationship, the way it started was through business, because at that point in time I was working, the internet came around. Okay. And I was one of the pioneers in the internet, and it was fun. It was so much fun in the beginning. It was great. And we made amazing money. Amazing. I mean, we would go in and we would do pitches, like for Epic Records. We did a pitch, and they were going to get 5 static pages, very little graphics on them. There was no functionality, and we charged them $180,000.
What?
And I think about that now. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. And they paid it happily, happily. Because at that point, it really was, if you build it, they will come. So it was when I was doing that and I was freelance. And so I met this man at a business meeting and we went to dinner and talked about doing some business together. And I was attracted to him, but he was married. And so we did business together, but I recognized that my emotions were getting out there and this was not going to be a good thing. And then he actually showed me in the very beginning exactly who he was, and I didn't believe him because one of the it's just like people with narcissistic personality disorder. They are able to find out exactly what it is you want, what you need, and they start pressing those buttons. And so
Right.
it's really easy. It is so easy relinquish your self agency when you're in that scenario. Looking back on it, you can really see it. Okay, but when you're in the middle of it, because it feels real. It feels real because they're able to mimic that. And
Right.
so, but what happened is he had some kind of thing happen with his wife, some illness, I don't know. And he just stopped all communication. And was my, that was my heads up. And so when he got back in touch with me a few months later, I was very cool and like, no, no, no. And he kept coming at me for a year and a half. He kept coming. And that's what they do because he felt like he had lost something. Because
Right.
whatever it was he wanted to take from me, he hadn't received, right? So as it progressed, it was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. He decided to get a divorce and he had 5 kids. And so what I thought was like, okay, so here's the thing. You're going to get a divorce. You need a place. I'll set a place up for you in Portland. I'm going to stay in LA, do my thing. You get your kids all squared away. So one of the kids decided he wanted to live with his dad. And so that changed everything. So I went in a time span of about 6 weeks. And this actually, for anybody who's sociopathic or narcissistic, this works in their favor if they start moving you quickly with some type of critical problem. Okay, because I'm a loyal person. I'm a person that if people need help, I'm there. And that that character trait got abused. And so I ended up within a matter of 6 weeks closing my apartment in LA, leaving LA, and all of a sudden I'm out in the country in Portland, Oregon with not one, but 5 kids. 5. And I never wanted children. I never wanted children. And they were from age 7 to 17 at that point. And I mean, I didn't even know. I had no idea what to talk to them about. I asked this man, I said, what do you talk to children about? I haven't been around children since I was one. What do you say? He was like, they're people. They're people. So you just sorry. I was like, okay, cool. Like people. All right, cool. And so that kind of took off. And then that first Christmas, I wanted to do something with the kids because we were going to have them that had nothing to do with the traditions that they had shared. So it would be something very different and fun. And so we went on a ski trip. And on Christmas Day, he and I got into an automobile accident and it shattered his hip. And when that happened, I had to get all 5 kids off a mountain. I had to get him down, to have surgery. And then I had to start running the business. And so I had all these things going on. And I was sitting, in a hospital room for 2 weeks in Salt Lake City and knowing that I needed to get out of here. But again, my loyalty wouldn't allow me to do that. This man is broken. He can't even walk. I couldn't do that. So I essentially, it was like, okay, this is what's got to happen. And so that's how it all kicked off. And during, in the beginning, he kept wanting me to have a baby. And I had told him, I'm never having a child. I don't want to have a child. You have 5 of them. How about we get them out the door? and then you can have grandchildren. How about that? And so what happened was, as things kept progressing and I kept noticing things that I did not like, and there was never any way to come to any resolution. And so I started acting out. And one of the things that he kept pushing me towards was, don't you think you could have a drink? Don't you think you could have a drink? You could have a drink. You haven't had a drink in so long. You think you can have a drink. And so as things got worse and worse, as he started taking more and more away from me and isolating me. I mean, I got moved even further out into the country. At one point, I wasn't allowed to pick up the mail. I decided I would go to school, and he tanked that. Anything I tried to do, he brick walled. And I got more angry and more angry. And then on one New Year's Eve, he and the kids did not know this. Okay, the children did not know this, that they were participating in this. Okay, but what essentially happened is they were all like, "Sure, we're going to do a shot. Take a shot. Take a shot." And I took a shot, and that put me on the rocket train to hell. Okay, because that kicked off my addiction, and so I didn't start drinking heavily to begin with. But as things got worse and worse and worse in our marriage, he started having affairs. My self esteem was gone. He had taken my self esteem, my self respect, my self confidence. All of that was gone. My resiliency was destroyed. And at the very end, I considered it a great day if I was able to wait to start my first bottle of wine until 10 in the morning. And then I would start drinking. And during this time, he also had developed a major prescription pill problem. And so one morning I got up and I was headed into the kitchen to, crack my first bottle of wine. And he was standing there crying. He said, "I think I'm going to die." And I was like, "Yeah, I think you are too." I did not care at that point. I did not care about him dying, me dying. I did not care. And I said, if you want to do something about that, I'll get you into a rehab. And so I did. And he spent 30 days in a lockdown facility to get clean, from prescription drugs. It's a process. And when he got out, I told him, I've got to leave. I need a break. I've got to leave. And so he had started going to meetings, and he met his next wife at one of those meetings. So at that point in time, I became a throwaway. And he had all of our money. He had everything. I had nothing, nothing. And I was dependent on him to send me money. So I went to Palm Springs to stay with a friend of mine, and then he stopped sending me money. And so it was so I had to go to my family, and that my family, that's always been a very rocky place, not really a place of safety for me, but I had to do that. And so for the next 9 months, I was trying to file for divorce. And he kept telling me that, I didn't have any faith, and I was broken. I was completely, totally, utterly broken. And so what I would do is I would go out, and this was in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'd go out to my sister's deck by her pond, and those really big yellowtail bottles of wine, you know what I'm talking
Mhm.
about? I mean, they're like huge. And I would
Yes.
take that outside, and I would take 2 packs of cigarettes, and I would take my Bible, and I would sit out there, and I would sweat, and I would drink this wine, I would smoke cigarettes, and I read the Bible. And it made zero sense to me. Okay? Zero, zero. But that's where God found me. That's where God found me, out there. And one day it just clicked. And I was real clear with God. It's like, yo, if you want me to do this, I'm going to sit in a pew every Sunday, and I'm going to do a spaghetti dinner on Sunday night. I can't do that. If we're doing this, I want the radical, all, I want the full thing. I want to know you. I want to know Jesus. I want to know the Holy Spirit. Let's do that. Let's do this. And that, I had no idea what I had asked for. Okay. I had no idea. But then what started happening as I started falling even further and further. So when I went back because I had to go back to Oregon to get a divorce, he had all of my clothing. He would not give me access to my winter clothing, so I had to get clothes from a friend. I had to ride the bus. I had never done that before. I had zero money, so I had to beg for jobs, and like friends would give me little things to like help me. I was staying at friends' houses, doing the couch surfing thing. I had never experienced any of that before. In other words, I had never been poor before. I had never experienced that. And when you don't have any money, there's a skill set that you develop if you don't have money. If you develop it, but if you've never had that experience, I didn't have the skill set. So I likened my emotional state to that of a horse trapped in a burning barn where I couldn't find my way out. I had a friend, he paid for my apartment, and I was going to church, but then I went to see a doctor because I was having such horrible nightmares. I cried all the time. There were days where I didn't know if I would live between each breath. I was in such emotional pain. In my whole life, I'm afraid of pain, physical pain, like I try to avoid that. But my emotional pain was so intense that I started cutting myself so I could have some type of pain that wasn't this hell I was existing in. And during that time, I was learning different things. And what God was doing is there were opportunities that came in that kept me. I never was able to like step fully back into power places because I needed to be changed. I needed some softening, because I wanted to fight and I wanted to kill. And that's kind of the person I was before all of this. So in a very, very interesting way, I'm amazingly grateful for the experiences I went through. Amazingly grateful. Because I have post trauma healing. And I'm grateful because who I am today, I adore this person. I love this person and I accept her faults. I accept her good stuff. It's like I am funny and sometimes I can't tell time and I'm cool with laughing about that. All right. It's like, and I'm all right with that. And so it was a slow progression. And I went to a doctor one day and I said, look, I need something because I literally cannot function. I'm having nightmares. And that was the first time that a doctor said, have you been tested for PTSD? And I said, no. And so I got tested for that. And that's when I started therapy. That's when I started working on PTSD, on healing from specifically what had happened. Now, during that time, one of my best friends was dying and he was dying of cancer. And I brought him into my apartment. And that was another thing that saved me because we had so much fun. We really, really did. And then even the end of his life was fabulous. And the night he died, the last time we talked, I love this story, so I'm just going to share it, even though it's not really about resilience. I just love this story. So, so when someone's dying, it's an in and out experience, and so I could see that he was dreaming and he was reaching up. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to get to see behind the veil. This is my moment. And so I was like, hey, are you seeing something? And he opened his eyes and he looked at me and he said, yes. I said, please tell me what you're seeing. And he looked right at me and said, I can't, Robin. I can't. And he closed his eyes, and those were the last things he said. And he died a couple of hours later.
Wow.
Yeah, but he was such a gentle, kind, caring, generous soul. So that's who I had in my corner when I was going through this. And things did not get really better. It was years. It was years. And it was years of me learning about myself. It was years of me forgiving myself. It was years of me watching how I had bent myself up so that people would love me because I believed that I was unlovable. So once I healed, God was like, okay, now we're going to take it on the road. And that's a whole, we don't even have time for that whole thing. I've written a book about it, and that'll be coming out next year. And it's
Yeah.
called Hook Echo Sagas. And it's a wild, fun ride. From that's okay. And I don't think that's boasting. That's what other people that I trust that are writers have said about it. So that's good. So I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I went back to LA for a few months, and I thought, okay, I'll become a producer again because I can make a lot of money really quickly, and that'll be great. But the truth is, and I got offered a job by Judd Apatow's at Apatow. Anyway, the 40-year-old version of those movies. I got offered a line producer job, and I thought about it, and I was like, I don't want to do this again. I do not want to work 7 days a week, 12 to 15 hours a day. I don't want to do this again. But had no idea what I wanted to do. And at that point, I was healed enough where I was ready to decide what I wanted to do, really truly, and what would make my heart sing. Excuse me. And I had moved back to Portland. And so what I decided at 62 was I was going to go back to college. And so that's what I did. I went back to college and I got a degree in psychology. Now, the way I got there is I looked at all of the jobs. I didn't have jobs, the careers I had had. And what were the similarities between all of them and stuff that I really loved, that I really enjoyed. And the things that came through were the times where I was teaching, the times where I was writing, the times where I was mentoring people, and all of my careers, that's been a part of them. So it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to go back. I'm going to get a psychology degree and I'm going to do something with it. I didn't even really know what I was going to do with it. And honestly, I wasn't confident at that point that I was going to succeed in going back to college at 62. But going back and doing that and being on the dean's list every semester and graduating with honors and getting a full ride at NYU, that convinced me. Okay. Now, I was supposed to go to NYU in January of 2020. That did not happen because we had a little pandemic. And so I was like, okay, all right, cool. What can I do? What can I do? So what I did was I went on Meetup and I thought, I know that there are people out there that have suffered narcissistic abuse. And there's a distinction between sociopathic abuse and narcissistic abuse. I'm not going to dive into that because it's really not relevant to this conversation. But I knew that there were people out there being destroyed the way I had been destroyed. And I knew I had tools that would help them get out, and not just get out, but heal and then have a beautiful, wonderful, fulfilling life. And so I went on Meetup and I was playing around with it, hadn't really been on the platform a lot. So I thought, okay, cool. Well, I'll put this little group together and, we'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to promote it, but we'll see what happens. And so I thought I had saved it to draft, but I hadn't. I'd posted it, taken it live. And so the next morning when I got up, there were 25 people and it kept growing and growing and growing. And so I started teaching the tools that had worked for me. And, now I have 500 people in 3 different meetup groups that I work with. And then I also started working with people individually. And I do work with psilocybin mushrooms, not in Oklahoma because it's illegal in Oklahoma. It's illegal in Oklahoma, but in Oregon, it's legal. Yeah. Okay. Just so we know. All right. I'm not doing anything illegal in Oklahoma. Okay. Um, and that is a really great tool I have found when people have blocks that they just can't get through. Okay. And as I started working with individuals and people who had suffered narcissistic abuse, it's a really effective tool for breaking through that.
Right.
And honestly, it's not something that has to be used a lot. And then there are other things that I use, like herbal There are herbal tinctures I use that can provide the same efficacies. So, so that's what started me on where I'm at now. And I love my life. And I was going to go ahead and get my master's, and I just decided, you know what? I just don't need any more letters behind my name. I can do what I'm doing. I'm good at that. I have the history, I have the knowledge, and I continue to grow, and I've gotten all kinds of certifications, so on and so forth. And then last year, the way I got to Oklahoma was last year. My niece and her husband lived here, and last year he committed suicide, and she needed my help, so I moved here, and I've kicked off a life in Oklahoma City, and I've met like-minded people and other practitioners, and just a beautiful community I'm developing for myself here as I'm creating this new life. And but through it all, what sustains me, what inspires me is when I'm working with people, and we're in the dark, and we're spending all this time in the dark, and then the light starts coming in, and then more light. And then we deal with the shadows that the light is creating, and watching them walk step by step to freedom, and freedom from not just the recent abuse, but from a lifetime of demeaning themselves, especially the women, and teaching them how to be who they are. Just be who you are. It will be a thing of beauty, and you'll be completely comfortable, and helping them get to that place. It's, I feel like in a way that they should be paying me to do this, because I get such joy out of being that person that's supporting them in that walk. It's a beautiful thing watching, and it chokes me up, because watching anybody who is walking out of a war, and they're coming out with, you can't see the wounds, but if you could, they would be in body casts. And the bravery it takes in watching people stand up to that and take ownership, and reclaim their self agency. It's beautiful. And so that's kind of where I'm at and what I'm doing today. And I love my life. And there are still things from the trauma that happened. Like, I second guess myself, and we were laughing about the time thing, but that was me second guessing myself, by, oh, did I get this right? And it was like, oh yeah, I had it right the first time. And, see, you second guessed yourself. And I can laugh about that stuff. I can laugh about that stuff. And so my life is deeper and richer and has more meaning and significance because of all of the horrible things I've gone through in my life. I mean, that's my story.
Yes. So I want to just go back. I'm so like speechless
That's okay. You know what, Denise?
of how you overcame. Like, I'm listening to you talk about getting through with being in a relationship with a sociopath. For one, before I even get into that, I just want to say, you always been this nice person with a big heart. It didn't have to take for you to go through that, but I think you had to go through something to be where you are now, right? We never want
Yes.
anything bad to happen or to be in any pain or be hurt, but without those things, it wouldn't mold us into who we are supposed to be all along. So, while you're telling me that, I'm listening to everything that you're saying. And through everything that you said, I'm like, Robin has a heart of gold, because you're in a relationship with a sociopath. He got hurt really bad. And although he's pulling you down with him, you want a drink? You want to have a drink? You didn't have a drink in a while. You want to have a drink? You are still there saying, I can't walk away from that. The situation is bad, but you see good deep down inside of the person. That says a lot about you. That was the first thing
Mm.
I've noticed. The second thing I've noticed is that congratulations to you for getting through that, okay? But no matter what you were doing, you still sat outside or wherever you sat and opened your Bible. Okay? Did you hear yourself? You opened your Bible. You didn't even know where you were heading. You were just like, God, this is where I'm at. So what is it? And that also says a lot about you and your faith. Your faith was still there. You know, you should be patting yourself on the back. I know you're probably like, what? But you got to take a step back and kind of just reflect. How did Robin get here? Look how much you have accomplished, how many things you went through to get where you are now. I'm super proud of you. I'm super proud of you. You're an author. You have degrees under your belt. Okay? You didn't let nothing stop you, not even the pandemic. That says a lot about you. And now you are helping other people. If that's not a blessing, if God is not working through you, I don't know what is, okay? Because through everything that you said, your spirit is just what you said, a light. The light just keeps getting bigger, and then it's the shadows. There is no more shadows. There is no more shadows, Robin. You are the light, which is why we were redirected to each other. We found each other, and we're sitting in this space right here, right now. So I'm super proud of you,
Oh,
Robin. Super, super proud of
thank you. I received that.
you.
I
Super.
received that, Tanir.
So,
I do. I really do.
question for you. I asked all my guests this question, and their responses have got me like shook in a good way. If you can give your younger self any advice, what would that advice be?
If I could give I've seen this question and I've pondered this question. I've pondered this question because I think it's important because we're talking to our younger selves all the time, right? Because
Right.
they're still in us. They're still in us. And so what would I tell her? What would I tell her? I would tell her no matter what they're saying to you, that's not your truth. That's what I would tell her.
Um,
Because I took on a lot of stuff that people, you're this, you're that, and the fingers out and being defined by other people. So, yeah, that's what I would tell her.
I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
If someone in the audience was watching this video and they may be battling a drug addiction, an alcohol addiction, dealing with a narcissist, a sociopath, or any things that you went through they can relate to, what advice would you give them?
Well, for drugs and alcohol, 12-step programs, there's a lot that's fallible about them. However, I feel like in that first 30 days, it's a really great place to start. It's a great place to start um, because you need the help. You need people to remind you that there's life after the drink. There is life, and therapy. I recommend therapy, and that's hugely important. And because one of the problems I think with 12-step programs is a lot of people who were sponsors do not have what you really need to act as a therapist. Even though they step into that space, I don't think that's the best thing. I think a therapist needs to be brought on board. I think that if you are dealing with prescription drugs, you need to go directly to rehab because that's where you're going to get the medical help that you're going to need, and you're going to need medical help. If you are someone who has had a lot, if you've had years and years and years of alcoholic abuse to where when you don't drink you start detoxing, you also are going to need medical help to get through that. And your family, if you have any family left, reach out to them and let them know I'm done and I don't know what to do. And admitting that you don't know what to do and you can't dance any faster and you can't stop. So I have found that God will honor that people will step into that. And it's a long path. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is not like, in 30 days, wow, with zippy doo dah, it's all great.
Right.
That's not going to be the case. But in reclaiming your self-esteem, it takes tiny little steps, daily accomplishments, being able to get up and out of bed and brush your teeth. That's a win. That's a win. And counting that as a win, because in our society, we are not taught to, and I've got a whole thing I teach about this. It's called marginal gain. But we're not taught to really celebrate ourselves with the small accomplishments we make on a daily basis. We are taught as a culture, it doesn't matter until everybody else has seen it and validated it. And you have a trophy, or you have 69 bazillion followers now, or whatever that is. And that demeans because if you're dealing with someone who is maybe depressed, and I'm not talking about someone who has chronic depression, which is a lifelong condition. That's a completely different scenario. I'm talking about you have depression periodic, or you're having episodic depression where you have maybe haven't been able to get out of bed in a week. So one day you're able to get up out of bed and you take a shower, but you go back and you lay down on the couch and you watch TV all day. That is a win. And in our brains, we are programmed to look at the negative. It's part of our survival instinct. So you have to override that and literally rewire your brain and train it to focus on the positive things that you're doing. And if all you did that day was get out of bed, shower, brush your teeth, and you made it to the couch, job well done. Job well done. And every one of those is because we're not damaged in one big moment. Okay. There's damage that leads up to it. It's like the water on a rock, right? One drop of water at a time over years, it creates huge holes. And so we're not going to build ourselves back by just one big, wonderful thing happening. It's daily facing yourself. It's daily walking and choosing to walk out of that and focusing on the positive things that you're doing every day rather than beating yourself up for the things you didn't do or you didn't do well. But we are taught in our culture, specifically the American culture, if you didn't hit that A, if you didn't do this, then it's not good enough. And that gets interpreted that we're not good enough. And that's not cool with me. So it's take into account the good that you're doing for yourself every day. And so even if you slip and take a drink, it's okay. You called somebody, or you didn't do it again, or whatever the win is, there will be a win there. And focus on that, not on what you're not doing or what you're not doing well. Yeah. Does that help? Did I answer the question?
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said, Robin. So, is there any way that we can connect with you?
Yes, you can please. I don't have my website up right now because I took everything down because I'm doing a little pivot in my life. That's why Pivots and Potholes, that's a podcast I have. And you'll find it's Life's Pivots and Potholes on all the little um podcast platforms. And Tanira will be on it sometime because she's agreed to be on mine, so that's awesome. So there's that. Also, you can reach out to me at RSJ Consulting, C A as in Apple at gmail.com. That's my email address. And you can reach out to me there. I'm on Meetup, and that's narcissistic abuse recovery groups. And so they're there for that. You can sign up for that, and just you can direct message me, and then we can connect that way. So right now, and I'm on Instagram at Pivots and Potholes on Instagram and on Threads. So I'm there as well. So you can hit me up there. And then I'm going to be coming out in a couple of months with some new material and things. I'll be hitting YouTube and doing a few new things. So yeah, that's how they can connect with me. And please know If you just have questions, whatever, I'm open and available to support you in finding the help you need. And that's the other thing. Okay, I want to say this because this is a big part of the way I work, because I work with the whole body. All right. I work with, and I work with practitioners who work on different parts of the body, because it took acupuncturists, it took massage therapists, it took traditional Chinese medicine, it took Ayurvedic medicine, it took therapists. All of those people helped me get my body back in alignment with my emotions, my soul, my mind, all of that. And so what I do, and what I call myself is, I'm a therapeutic guide and integration specialist, because as I work with my clients, when they need, another practitioner, that's where I send them. I am not about therapy taking forever. It's like, what we need here, we need an acupuncturist. So let's go to the acupuncturist. And then when you get through with that, come back, we'll integrate that and move on. All right. So I think that's hugely important, because also doing talk therapy a few years ago, and this was during the pandemic, so it didn't get a lot of press, and the psychology world is not really talking about this. And when I say this, you're going to understand why. But what they have found is that long-term therapy, especially if you're focusing on going back and re-experiencing trauma or damage that was done to you, it is actually re-traumatizing. Okay, so it's really key to work from the now and how you perceive this now. And so that's just a note for the listeners, viewers, so that they understand that you know if somebody's talking to you and they say, I've been in therapy for 5 years, please recommend that they try another therapist or try another avenue, because now, thankfully, live in a world where it's not stigmatized to ask for the help you need. And there's all kinds of support out there. There's free support out there. There's all kinds of money that you can find to help you in this. There are communities. And so I just want to encourage that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm changing my website, because the work that I do, I call life bridging. But the I'm going to call it a consortium, if you will, is bridging.life. And what this is going to be about is, I'm going to have all kinds of different practitioners who are going to be vetted that will be on this, so people can come and they can find all different types of practitioners, not just me, but people that I know, people in all over the country. So it's not going to be just Oklahoma City, because it's really difficult to try to find what you need. And so that's why I'm doing this pivot. So yeah.
Did you want to
I just have to.
mention your book?
Oh yeah. Next year, it's called Hook Echo Saga. And if you're from Oklahoma, or you're from any place that has tornadoes, you know what a hook echo is. And so that's going to be about. It's about my journey with God, my journey with self-discovery, and it's told in parts of the book are fiction and parts of them are absolutely true. And the reader's going to have to determine which is which.
Nice.
Okay, there's some fun stuff in it. Fun stuff, Tanir.
So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to super, super proud of you, Robin. As she said, everything that you can connect with her from, it will be linked in the description. So as we thank you for joining
Awesome.
us.
Thank you, Tanir. Thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing here, and I think you're doing important work.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
and
much.
you're going to be on my podcast, so we'll get that hooked up. We'll get it hooked up.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for joining us
Yeah,
for our Study Untold Studios today. We hope this conversation has inspired and empowered you. Remember, even in the darkest moments, William's faith and courage can lead to a brighter future. If today's episode resonated with you or someone you know, please like, share, and subscribe to help us spread these powerful stories. Until next time, keep believing in your strength and the possibilities that lie ahead. Talk to you guys soon.